Technology isn't just a part of our everyday lives anymore. It's become a frontier for global powers, with India right in the mix. So why not join the conversation? Take the Technopolitics survey created by researchers at the Takshashila Institution. It's just 10 simple questions, but your answers could help shape India's strategy in navigating the fast changing world of high tech geopolitics. Your voice matters, so let's make it heard. The link is in the bio.
Welcome to All Things Policy, a daily podcast by the Takshashila Institution. We are a bunch of policy nerds based in Bengaluru, and we like bringing fresh perspectives to Indian affairs and Indian perspectives to global affairs. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and join us for today's chat.
Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of All Things Policy. I'm Anusri Suresh, a research associate at the Takshashila Institution, and I'm your host for this episode. Today, we are going to discuss a very important question. India's property sector, and very specifically, what's the role of startups in tackling India's urban housing challenges? We're joined by Shubhankita Reddy. She's a research analyst at the Takshashila Institution, and urban housing challenges is one of her favorite topics. Welcome to the podcast, Shubhankita.
Thank you, Anushree. Good to be here.
Yes. So let's get started with our very interesting topic of discussion. So, with rapid urbanization, the housing shortages in urban areas are becoming a huge public challenge. And there are quite a lot of government initiatives aimed at providing affordable housing in our cities. And I think the market is also developing to meet these demands as well. So, before we get into the details of that, Shubhankita, let's set some context here. So, can you provide an overview of urban housing problems in India and the structural reasons behind this concerns?
Yeah. So before we get into the urban housing challenges particularly, I'd like to talk about the macro context and India's construction economy.
Yeah.
And this is obviously, next only to agriculture, the second largest employer as a sector for India.
Yeah.
And the construction economy, is a lot more than just residential, right? We have infrastructure, industrial, commercial. We have other kinds of construction activities going on. But really, 38% of all volume in the construction sector is purely residential. And residential real estate alone is about 6% of India's GDP.
Wow.
So this is really a very important sector.
That's a huge number, yes.
Correct. And globally as well, property really is the single most storage for wealth for people globally. So this is really very, very important.
Yeah.
Now, coming to the structural reasons behind India's urban housing challenges, at the risk of simplification, I would like to talk about 4 specifically. So Indian cities are overcrowded, they have insufficient infrastructure and offer a low quality of life to residents. And, one of the reasons is that India has massive regional imbalances. So if you look at state domestic product, it's higher for southern states as compared to the rest of the country.
Yes.
And we have massive disparities across all indicators between regions. And just a narrow 25-kilometer Siliguri corridor connects the 7 northeastern states to the rest of the Republic of India.
Yeah.
This means that when it comes to human development indicators, economic activity, job opportunities, there are only a few pockets in India which attract a high level of migrants from the rest of the country.
Yeah.
And India has not actually built many new greenfield planned cities since independence. Surely we have some examples in Chandigarh which came about because of the division of Punjab at the time of partition. We've developed Noida and Gurgaon. We have the examples of Gandhinagar and Naya Raipur when the states of Gujarat and Chhattisgarh were formed. But these are examples far and few in between. But we really haven't developed new centers of economic activity for people to aspire to and then travel to for seeking jobs. The other problem is that, unlike in the US, for example, the city of Sacramento is the capital of California, but the most popular and populous city in California is not Sacramento, it's Los
Yeah.
Angeles.
Yes.
When it comes to Washington, the capital is Olympia. So the seat of political and administrative power is not Seattle, which is really the thriving economic activity city in the state. What happens in India is that because we have the same city, which is the popular one, the populous one, the seat of power, as well as all the economic activity. It just so happens that the local governments are not sufficiently empowered, be it in financial resources, be it in decision-making power,
Yeah.
especially when the larger political structures in the
Yes.
same city kind of drive the narrative
Yeah.
and priorities for the city,
I
right?
think the classic case today is like Delhi for that matter. And like many of the like municipal finance itself is a very interesting topic that we could dive into. Yeah.
So what that means is, regional politics and the nature of cyclical governments in most of our state governments just means that cities kind of get left out.
Yes.
And cities, unfortunately, are also not where the vote bank lies.
Yeah.
So it just so happens that the rest of the state is the vote bank, which is largely tied to Tier 3 cities, and we've not really built too many cities. So it's largely, really, large towns, mid-sized towns, etc. And, much of that gets plundered in the city for political incentives.
Yeah.
So those kind of mismatched incentives really, are detrimental to the quality of life and infrastructure and services that our cities can offer. This is slowly changing. For example, we have the Smart Cities mission, which envisions the development of about 100 cities. We have Amrit as a mission. We also have several programs for slum rehabilitation in progress right now. We're trying to develop satellite cities, for example, the way Pune was developed, to kind of reduce congestion and burden on Mumbai.
Yes.
But the results of this have really been mixed. For example, Mysore was supposed to be developed as
to take
satellite
away the load
structure.
from the Bangalore, but like
Yeah, and that really hasn't happened. It really hasn't taken off to the way it was envisioned. So the truth of the matter as of today is that because of some of these structural problems, we just have not been able to cope up to the modern day demands that our population and just aspirations of our people place
Yeah.
on these cities.
Yeah. So that's a very, very interesting matter, actually, Shubhankita. So, like, I'm actually wondering how, like, obviously, urban housing is a huge challenge, and a lot of like our urban migrants and all facing this issue at a larger scale. So, like, how do these problems affect the average Indian home buyer or renter in these cities?
Yeah. So I think first is that in many pockets in these urban cities, the price of land, the price of housing has just drastically increased. And it has not been commensurate to the way incomes have increased, which means that this is actually beyond the affordability of most citizens. So it is really, the prices of land and homes have really just scaled disproportionately higher than what people's ability to buy or invest in these has allotted, has availed, right?
Yeah.
So I think that is one. The second is that even if you have the money and if you're able to, finally afford a home, the problem is that there is a lack of transparency in the home buying experience. The experience itself is very, very broken.
Yeah.
Be it brokers and agents and other third parties, but really the information asymmetry in the real estate market is just, it's just higher than you would think in most other industries. And if you think about mortgage rates and rental yields, again, that's very disproportionate.
Yeah.
For example, India lies in the bottom 10% of the top 100 countries when comparing rental yields against mortgage ratios. So we really have a broken rental market with really low rental yields, right? Like 3 to 4% on average. And what has also happened is the sector has suffered from really high inefficiencies. So it's not very uncommon to see projects that have stalled, projects that have just really not taken place after the money has been pooled by the developers, right? So we have all of these inefficiencies in productivity as well as timelines, and much of these projects from the developers end are financed through debt.
Yeah.
So the time variable cost of debt, even for the developers, is really, really high. And given just the nature of these projects, their size, they can potentially be a systemic risk as well.
Yeah.
Right. So we do have construction project delays, time variable costs of debt, and just the high price on land acquisition and pricing, and all the focus going on land alone has meant that most developers have not really innovated on the housing unit
Yes.
as it is.
Yeah.
So, most 2 BHKs will look exactly the same.
Yeah.
They're cookie cutter units.
Yes.
Right? There has really not been much innovation and design thinking in some of these designs, in the layout of, the housing unit particularly. So really, this has been a laggard when it comes to technical innovation. It has not really kept up with the demands that people expect.
Yeah.
And it's also a very, very polluting sector, right? I mean, the construction industry in India contributes a significant 32% of the national greenhouse gas emissions.
That's again a huge number that we have to consider.
Yes. And think about also steel and cement, right? Just the production of these two items singularly adds so much more in our GHG emissions. Did you know that concrete is the second most produced material globally? First is clean drinking water, second is concrete, right? So these are the demands that we have of just our housing requirements, and really it has not been commensurate to what people's requirements to have a decent quality of life in these cities is.
Yes. So that's I think like you actually identified quite a lot of like market failures as well as maybe a bit of government failures as well in the conversation, right? So like when we look at the market failures, like you mentioned, information asymmetry and everything, the next question is like what the state can do, right? Like what kind of government intervention can do it to tackle these problems. And if you look at it, we have quite a few of like government initiatives like intended to address the problem of affordable housing in India. So like how do you look at it? Like what is the role of state in tackling these problems?
So I think the first is that we do have a RERA Act, which came into effect in 2017.
Okay.
And just to, I think, pause the kind of fund mismanagement and the pausing of project inefficiencies that was kind of going on, we did have in the mandate of this act that developers were required to deposit 70% of the funds collected from buyers into an escrow account. And this was to be dedicated solely for the construction of these projects. So we did have some of these measures. But the problem, I think, with RERA is that the implementation has been primarily left to the states, and some states have more robust systems in place than others. So really, the outcomes from this have been mixed. So I think the first is that this can be encouraged for the state governments in terms of being able to just implement them a little more uniformly across states and take best practices from states where this has worked into states where maybe they've not been so proactive with their online portals, registration of RERA Act properties.
And standardize it across the country.
Yeah, so I think that's one. The second also is that we have very restrictive idea of what housing units should look like. Right. And I'm referring to a paper particularly, and it's called Building Regulations Are a Barrier to Affordable Housing in Indian Cities, the case of Ahmedabad. And this is a paper co-authored by Bimal Patel. And what they're really talking about is that if you look at just the city of Ahmedabad, they take an example where to convert agricultural land to a commercial housing use, and just the entire bureaucratic process before it can be sold to the end consumer takes about 16 bureaucratic chokeholds. And this is the conversion of agricultural land to commercial property, as well as just the monitoring and construction and being able to get the required permits all along.
Yeah, this is actually reminds me like we had a conversation like 2 days ago. So we are talking about like why the special economic zones in India weren't that successful. So one of the major reasons for its failure is like, the underutilization of land within this special. So like, there's no leniency for mixed use of like land for different purposes and everything. So yeah, like I think that is probably one of the reasons also, like, maybe the city is also like affected by those challenges and everything.
Yeah, and apart from this, I think we've also inherited very generous requirements for what a house should look like. And this really is not commensurate to the needs of the modern day citizen, right?
Yeah.
Like there are restrictions on number of housing units you can have on a certain size of land. There are restrictions or designated sizes of internal roads and widths.
Yes,
and these
yes.
are very, very restrictive. I think you should leave market forces to kind of decide that.
I think up to the aspirations of the like the consumers. Yes, for sure.
So all of these bureaucratic processes combined with some of these regulations which are imposed by the state on developers just means that the concept of affordable housing has really gone out of the window.
Yeah.
It's just not economically feasible for some of these developers to even dabble in that kind of price structures at that level for affordable housing.
Yes.
At the end of the day, all of these costs that they incur throughout these processes, they are just kind of transferring it to the end consumer.
Yeah.
And that just means that we have a high proliferation of slums and we do not have the concept of affordable housing again.
Yeah.
So, some of these simple things which are really colonial legacy, apart from simple zoning regulations which are restrictive, should really just go out of the window. So I think that's something that the state can do. The state has been trying when it comes to RERA Act and the likes, a little more standardization, a little bit of process automation and streamlining in these regards can be very helpful.
Yeah. So I think like because of these regulatory hurdles, like, the innovation, like you mentioned, the innovation in the system and the sector is like kind of quite affected. So now I'm coming to the most important part of our discussion. So like, we looked at the market failure aspect of it, or like the inefficiencies in the market. And then we also looked at what is the role of the state, right? So now coming to the startup ecosystem, or like, the private enterprises, what role they could play in addressing these problems. Like, what are the market solutions for this challenge?
Yeah. So I think the Indian prop tech industry, which is broadly to say any property technology startup, they have really reimagined spaces. They have reimagined the way consumers interact with real estate over the last 15 years. And if you compare with, I think, other kinds of sectors, this has not really seen that much action. But, I think there is a lot of potential for Indian startups to step in and solve some of these needs. And just to kind of, set some context, back in 2010, 2012, with the coming of the internet, we saw digitization of most things in the internet economy, right?
Yeah.
And really the prop tech industry also did that, which is your newspaper classifieds for finding a home for rent or buying really got digitized, and we saw online property listing platforms.
Yes.
And I'm thinking of Makaan, 99 Acres, and Magic Bricks.
Yes,
right. And
that's
I
the
think
popular ones in Bangalore also.
Yes. And I think the second wave of prop tech startups that we saw really imagined spaces, and that's where we have the examples of co-living and co-working spaces.
Yeah.
They really innovated with what could happen in a given piece of land.
Yeah.
And we also had the concept of shared economy, which is for Lenco and the likes, which were trying to say you can rent furniture and you don't need to invest as a capex, but you can really rent furniture commonly owned.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So I think they really innovated in some of these things. 10 years ago, we also had the coming of augmented reality and virtual reality, and being able to imagine what kind of homes you're going to buy, and being able to see that, and being able to use technology to market your homes better.
Yes.
So we had enhanced consumer experience that was enabled by technology that some of these startups kind of brought about. We also saw the trend of vertical software emerging, which is that platforms for property management, CRM systems, digital marketing tools, as well as just construction management projects, right?
Yeah.
So, for example, we had a bunch of design software that helps with procurement as well as just designing the layout of your home better, managing the bill of materials, ensuring that the costs there are insured, just project management softwares that are very, very tailored to the construction industry. This is again, a software intervention that startups had when it came to construction materials, their procurement, and the way housing and everything else is designed. So I think, if you look historically, there has been action that startups have kind of helped bring. And I think there is reason to believe that if you look at other geographies, that startups have done a lot more. And I think there's no reason that this cannot happen in India particularly. And when I say this, I mean specifically the idea of fractional ownership and financing models.
Okay.
So if it's not possible for me alone to invest a lump sum amount and buy one home, can I not pool in whatever money I have along with thousands others like me and then own a common property?
Yeah, that's a very interesting model, I guess.
Correct.
Yeah.
And we have examples of micro saving and micro transaction platforms in India, in other sectors, in investing for mutual funds, in investing for gold, in investing for fixed deposits. So why do we not have this for the property sector, right? And especially with the government's push to be digitizing land records, this should become a little easier as well. It should just be possible. So I think that is one, which is we can have innovative financing models that are mobile first, very consumer friendly, that allow people to take part in this in land and property as an asset. And the second I would say is the emergence of companies that are innovating in alternative construction materials and methods. And some of these answer the question of, the problem to the climate impact of construction, the materials used, optimizing there. So we're looking at sustainable, recyclable materials to be building our homes with. We're looking for better materials, which helps us with, during the course of the building management, to be able to consume less power and to also save on energy management, right? So I think that's one. And the other is just for the speed with which we need housing units to be built, there are other kinds of construction methods that could potentially be used. For example, precast concrete is one, which is that the curing of concrete takes really 7 to 28 days. And that can really be fastened if you do off-site casting and curing of concrete, and then you essentially just put them together on site. Correct? And some of these processes like carbon curing of concrete, drip curing technology to save water while the making of concrete, all of these have become quite common. For example, even the PMAI, AY, which is the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, has approved this for the building of affordable homes. So we do have technologies that now enable that. I think there's a lot that startups can do in terms of modular construction, which is prefab and modular construction, right? Which is off-site manufacturing and then on-site assembly of panelized walls, stairs, floors, roofs, etc. And using mild steel and aluminum and saving on material for some of these things. We can have material science innovations again in some of these products. And again, one area which is still very, very nascent, but has seen some success in the US at least, is 3D printing of homes. And actually, if you think about modular homes and prefab construction, China actually has a policy mandating that 30% of all new buildings by 2026 are to be prefab. So it's quite common. For the sake of efficiency and just saving on urban space and pollution by mitigating this to offsite manufacturing alone. So we have seen some examples of this that have worked in other geographies. There's no reason to believe that we can't implement some of these led by technical innovations and better operational management and logistics that some startups can be innovating in.
So I have a small doubt. We already covered the regulatory hurdles in the ecosystem and everything. Is there any challenge for the startups to come up and set up in India?
So I think there are a few risks per se, right? And one is that right now we don't have regulations and government incentives for some of these things to happen. In India, all green building laws and codes are voluntary. And the problem also is that because the real estate sector has largely been a technology laggard, and it really has not seen a lot of technology penetration. Multiple disparate decision makers and stakeholders
Yes.
exist.
Yeah.
So for a new startup to come in and then to be able to tie in all these stakeholders together and then operate in a very real estate regulation environment that's still very shaky or still very voluntary based,
Yeah.
I think can be one kind of risk for startups to navigate.
Yeah.
The problem also with some of the solutions that I just gave in terms of construction materials and methods particularly is that the cost of solutions today is considered too high, which is that there's a lot of work to be done just in technological developments for some of these solutions, right?
Yeah.
So fragmented industry, many decision makers, we don't have uniform practices, and the cost of solutions today is considered high. But I would say that's also the opportunity for startups to be innovating in this.
Yeah.
And we have seen, for example, with the coming of augmented reality and virtual reality, that even large developers and builders today have adopted these in the way they sell and market their final housing units, right?
Yeah.
And just to give a few examples from other geographies, we have seen emergence of full stack support services to buying a home in other geographies in a way that it doesn't exist in India as yet. For example, today all you have is a marketplace that connects people who want to buy a home to those who have a home, or those who want to rent a home to those who want to lease out a home.
Yeah.
So we have online marketplaces, but these are not full stack in the sense that they don't own the home themselves. But in Brazil and other geographies, and there are examples of startups like Open Door, Loft, Casavo, in other geographies, and they really own the unit completely themselves. They do the property management, they do the marketing, they do the development, they do the repair, and they actually are end to end, right? Like they've completely removed the need for another intermediary kind of a role that Indian startups today are only playing.
Okay.
And we also have, the shift from a listing and searching marketplace to ownership-led business models.
Oh, nice.
So we see that.
Yeah.
The second, I would say, is just better customer buying experience.
Yes.
The problem today is the tenant and the landlord don't trust each other.
Yeah.
Right. So.
Yeah.
Can startups come in and solve some of these trust issues with just better management and playing a better role in that transaction? Better vertical AI software to be able to design, to better project manage, resource allocation, building information modeling, the CAD designs, right? So there's a lot of scope for that, and also data-backed research services and opportunity exists for consumer-first developers, right? And by this I mean that. If you think about it, most 2 BHKs, like I was saying, are cookie cutter the same.
Yeah.
So there is an opportunity for startups to come in and do better research as to what consumers really want out of their home. Because your home is the single most space you spend the most time in. And, in your personal capacity, that's really all your time to the most part, right?
Yeah.
So can we do the design thinking, the innovation, just managing that space a little better? Can startups fill in that role? I think there are examples in other geographies to say that we can inculcate better cultural norms, geographical requirements from one 2 BHK to another, depending on where it is, if it's east facing or north, what the cultural practices of the people living in that home are. So there is a lot of scope in innovations in this space that are just not explored. So I would say as consumers, we really are at this point getting the short end of the tail.
This is like quite an insightful discussion, Shubhangi. I think like the innovative market solutions and everything is like quite. I think there's a lot of scope in these areas where you can, the market can step in, the investors can step in, and the startup ecosystem can step in. So I think one of my key takeaways from this discussion is like, along with, we also discuss the government's role in the ecosystem and everything. So more than that, I think, or the equally important one is that ensuring the private sector's role in this ecosystem, like making sure there is a planned supply of affordable ownership housing and innovative market solutions to the challenges in the urban housing sector. And overall, the complexities of the redevelopment of slums, unplanned settlements, and the planned supply of affordable housing require a lot of attention from all stakeholders together. So I think it's also very essential to reflect on the learnings from our past and see the existing regulatory hurdles and everything, and see how we can better the house of the growing urban population in the future. And yeah, I think this has to be integrated into the existing policy. So thanks a lot, Shubhangita. It was a really interesting discussion. So thank you, everyone, listening to our podcast. We'll be back with another interesting topic soon.
If you liked our show, dive into Takshashila's research on technology, strategy, and economic affairs. Check us out at our Twitter handle @TakshashilaInst or our website takshashila.org.in.